Welcome to Tea and Talk. I'm your host, Olivia Boughton. Today I am joined by Mary Reczek. Mary, thank you for being here with me today.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk to you about all kinds of different things, I'm sure. But first we'll start by talking about the tea. So you told me that you are a fan of green tea.
Yes, I am.
So I looked through my selections and I chose a green tea that has some flavoring to it. It's called Island Dreams.
Oh, that sounds good.
Mm-hmm. And you can see I have a little bit of the loose leaf here. It has some blue cornflowers in it, and then it also has some rum flavor, some pineapple flavor, and some coconut flavor.
Oh.
Yeah, so.
Variety.
Yes, a variety, and it should kind of evoke island dreams. So clearly I am still in the Bermuda mindset. So, you know, what are you going to do? And to that same vein, the teapot that I'm using today, I actually purchased while I was in Bermuda. So if any of the viewers have watched my previous episode, you'll know what I'm talking about. But this teapot is something that I picked up there. It's a stoneware teapot made in Bermuda by an artisan who lives and works there. So
beautiful coloration.
Isn't it though? We went into a shop and I saw it and I'm like, okay, you know, now that I have the show, I have way too many teapots, but that's another story. So it did not have matching teacups to go with it, but I had these nice little teacups in my collection, which were a gift from Father Vinny, who you know, and they are meant for green teas or oolong, and they have these lovely little saucers with dragonflies on them. So because we're drinking green tea, I did bring along a little honey, or you can just have it as is.
I like it as is.
All right, so let me pour you a little bit of tea. We can try this out.
By the way, this is a beautiful runner.
Oh, thank you.
Is that anything you made? Or?
It is something that I made, yes. How did you know that?
Well.
I didn't tell her that off camera. So, yeah. Me and my crocheting, you know. I thought, oh, the color's a nice contrast with this.
It is.
With this teapot, so I'll use that today. All right, well, cheers, Mary.
Thank you.
Yes, nice to have you on the show.
Very light and flavorful.
Yeah, good. I'm glad. Yeah, it has a nice aroma.
Yes.
You know, it has that green tea, but there's a little extra with those flavorings in it.
And the coconut isn't overpowering.
No, yeah, sometimes you put coconut in things and that's all you can taste, but this is a nice blend, I think. So, Mary, let's talk about you. Tell me where you grew up and what your childhood was like.
Well, I was born at the Rutland Hospital to first-generation birthright Americans.
Uh-huh.
And I was one of 5 children, the only girl, had 4 brothers.
Where did you fall in that?
I was the second.
You were the second.
I was the second. As my younger brothers used to say, you were in charge.
So they knew.
The first sibling always is out tilting at windmills and this, you know.
Right.
So in any event, we lived in a home that my grandfather and grandmother bought in the 1920s. And because my grandmother died at a very early age, my grandfather continued, or I should say my mother was taking care of my grandfather until he died. So it was a nuclear family plus one.
Yeah, yeah.
I went to school at St. Stanislaus, graduated from West Rutland High School. Then earned my bachelor's degree in history and social studies at the College of St. Rose in Albany, and later a master's degree in education. So I was prepped to be a teacher, I guess, and I did that for 30 years.
Yeah. So was teaching something that you were interested in pursuing, or did you feel like that was?
Well, at that time there weren't a lot of choices for women.
True.
You could be a nurse, you could be a teacher, or you could be a secretary, or work in some sort of business. Not as necessarily the owner or the manager, but So yes, I think even today when I talk to people, I find myself teaching them. So I think that was natural. I will tell you this, when, back in the day when masses were all in Latin, I had to teach my brothers the Latin answers. You couldn't be an altar boy until you knew all the answers in Latin, so we used to play mass.
So you had school.
We had school, but we had to play mass, and I was a priest. And they, and when they goofed up, we started all over again.
I say, nope,
So,
nope, over again, do it
Yes.
again.
So I taught for 30 years, and about the time that I retired, one of my aunts died on my father's side, and she had left everything to her brother, who was a Franciscan missionary,
Oh, wow.
and he was just lost. Not only that he had lost his sister, but he had no clue. So I asked him, do you need any help? He handed me the keys to the house, and my second career was born, which was cleaning people's houses, estates, moving.
Yes.
And I did that for about 25 years.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed that too, because you were always researching, you were always talking to people, advertising, selling, and so on.
Yeah, and in a way, it's its own form of history,
Yes.
right? A very personalized history of a particular person or a particular family in a particular place. But that's all within a context of,
Yes.
of the larger
Yes.
community.
And really the only difference is some of the collections that people did have, they waxed and waned. People were interested for 5-10 years, and then nobody wanted it.
Yes.
So it was difficult, because some things we got an exorbitant amount of money for the estate, and some things we had to say, I'm sorry, no one wants it.
Yeah, and it's like you said, the tastes are constantly changing.
Yes.
So something that at one time would have had value,
Yes.
at the time that it's ready to be sold to somebody else, the value has greatly diminished.
Culturally, we changed so rapidly between,
Yes.
well, when I was a young child in the 50s and then in the 60s, to let's say the 80s and 90s. I
Very
mean, that
different.
was a massive, massive change in culture.
Yes, and from then, from the 80s and 90s to today,
Yes.
kids growing up today, just the technology alone
Yes.
has really just propelled us forward at such a rate that it's hard to keep up sometimes. And I think that affects everything,
Yeah,
in
and
our-
I think I see too many people foregoing the things we used to enjoy for the computer or the cell phone,
Right,
so on.
right, yeah. I know, right? You don't see a lot of kids out in the street playing, riding their bikes.
No, and everything is so organized today. We had this discussion one day about the, is it AAU?
Oh, yes, basketball.
I mean, kids and families are never home on weekends because
yeah,
they're out playing basketball or baseball, soccer, whatever happens to be.
right,
And-
right. Whereas, years ago, it would be just a pickup game
Yep.
in the street,
You found all your neighbors,
Yep.
and I lived in a neighborhood where there were no girls growing up. So
What was that like?
well, when I finally went to an all-girls college, it was an eye-opener. But the boys, usually my younger brothers, would start it, and would you pitch to us? That sort of thing.
Yep.
And you never called, you never made appointments. You just went and knocked on the door and said,
Hey,
"Is so and so available? Can he come out and play?"
right. Yeah, very different today, where we are so reliant upon our schedules.
Yes.
I mean, even from the youngest to the oldest of us, our time is very structured in our society today.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I always wonder if the younger generation, the kids grew up in the 21st century, are taking the time to smell the roses, because there's so many pressures on them.
Yes, there are a lot of pressures. Yeah, and it's hard to step away from that, even when you want to, because it's all around you.
Yes.
Those influences.
And competitive.
And very competitive. Yes. So back to your teaching. So what level did you teach? What subject?
Well, I was certified to teach 7 through 9. At that time,
Okay.
you had to have a secondary school certification.
Okay.
I taught for a year down in Westchester County, and that was great because some of my friends from college lived in New York City, so
Yes,
that
nice.
was good. But it was, the community was, I'm not going to say not to my liking. They were fine. They were wonderful people. It's just there was nothing for me there.
Yeah.
So that was at the same time that Mount Anthony in Bennington had just completed the school, and they thought that they probably wouldn't have to hire any teachers. But then, lo and behold, they came from 5 different districts, and all the teachers there had elementary certification.
Ah.
Plus, Bennington Catholic High School closed that year. So there were 3 buildings that had to be,
I see. Staffed.
yes. And so they were hiring, and that's how I began at Mount Anthony. And I stayed in 7th and 8th grade, basically, my whole career.
Did you like teaching that age?
I do, and I'll tell you why, is that every day is different. Some people will say, well, don't you ever get bored? You teach the same thing year after year. And I no, I don't, first of all. And secondly, the students, the crises they used to come into school with, at first we didn't realize it, but then gradually we began to get, more help in the schools through IEPs and aides and so on.
Yeah.
But some of their life stories were just horrendous.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of conversation about feeding the kids and so on. I mean, you haven't seen a child that doesn't have a winter coat and a child who hasn't eaten his breakfast. And how do you expect them to perform? They're never going to be on the same level as their peers.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And that, that age that you're talking about, right? Like 12, 13, right? Maybe some 14-year-olds, right?
It is chaotic.
Right. There's, the hormones,
Yes.
right? That's just naturally what's happening at that age. But then the social structures are really starting to come together, and you have all these different dynamics playing out. And like you said, it's different every day. And I think for kids at that age, it is different every day. And I think a lot of people are hesitant to teach that age group because it's so chaotic.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I think the bottom line is you have to get them to focus, at least for a little while.
Yes.
But, they're going through significant changes physically and
Yes.
emotionally.
Yes.
And the girls are always probably 18 months to 24 months ahead of the boys.
Right. Yes.
Sometimes the boys didn't know what was hitting them, But yes, there were different levels of intelligence. There were different levels of financial backing and parental backing and so on. And I would say at the time I started teaching, there was still a respect for school. There was a respect for learning. And that was important to me because my parents were wanted to complete their education but couldn't because it was the Depression.
Yeah. Yeah.
And from the time we were very young children, we heard the word college.
Yeah.
It was not debatable.
Right. You were going.
You were going.
You were going. Yeah.
So it was just a matter of figuring out where and majoring in what subjects and so on.
Right.
So it's difficult for different children on different days. Sometimes the person who is ultra smart is. You see him sitting alone because he or she can't communicate with other kids.
Yeah.
Of course, sports plays a big role at that age.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah, and who's good at what sports and who's not.
Yeah, and we used to give aptitude tests in the 8th grade, and that was really the only form of testing we did back then. But it was to help the guidance department and the high school help the children to decide what courses to take.
Yeah.
And they filled out a preliminary form that basically said, what are your interests? And of course, everyone put down baseball or basketball or whatever. And then, as you proceeded down the list of questions, the next thing it said was, you can't use athletics as the thing you want to, major in or make a living in.
Oh, shoot.
Oh, that was horrible. Well, why can't we? That's what we like. Well, and I think I remember a statistic from that time period. It was like 0.004 men ever make any money with their athletic prowess.
Yes.
And it was 0.002 women.
Yeah.
And this was before Title IX.
Right.
So there were no opportunities for women, basically.
In sports, yeah.
Or you made your own.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a very disquieting time of their lives.
Yeah.
But
yeah, well, and I think, at that age too, right, they're idolizing different famous people, right?
Yes.
Sports stars or movie stars or whatever, musicians. And I think it's very easy to think, I could do that, If that person can do it, I can do it too. And it's much harder and more complicated.
If I work hard enough, well, sometimes when I watch the skaters during the Olympics, I mean, they're up at 3 o'clock in the morning, skating till 8, and then going to school or
There's
whatever.
no life.
No.
It is just
from the time you're 3 years old to the time you enter into the Olympics or become an Olympian.
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
They give up a tremendous amount.
They do. And for some people, that's okay, But I think the average 7th or 8th grader doesn't understand that.
Most of us don't have that in us.
No, we do not. Would you like some more tea?
Yes, please. That was very good.
Right. You can hold that. All right, I know, it's yummy.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'll pour a little more for myself. So, while you were teaching, did you ever have a year that you found was either particularly wonderful or particularly difficult?
Well, I should start by saying they were all difficult to some degree. And it wasn't because of the students. Sometimes it was administration. I hate to say this, but someone cataloged one time. They kind of forget the junior high. And we were a junior high. This was before middle school.
Yes. Yeah.
We had something like 37 administrators.
Wow.
We had little turnover with teachers.
Yeah.
But tremendous turnover with administrators.
Wow.
So
it's hard to have continuity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It varied from year to year. Sometimes I got the greatest satisfaction. In those days, we also did A, B, and C levels.
Oh.
That was still allowed.
Okay.
And sometimes I got the most satisfaction from working with the kids who couldn't read. Yeah. I mean, there's nothing more powerful than teaching an 8th grader, 13, 14 years old, who can't read on the 2nd grade level, to bring his reading level up to like 5th or 6th.
Yeah.
And there was a whole change in personality in this young man.
Right. Well, you're in a way you're empowering that person, right?
Yes.
You're giving them something that they can then use to better themselves, to interact with the world around them, and they don't continue to feel like they're being left out because they don't have this skill.
Yeah. For the first part of the year, he kept his head down most of the time, didn't say anything.
Yeah.
Even to the other students. And when he became a little bit more confident, he was telling everybody what they should do, And they listened to him.
The student became the teacher, as the saying goes. That's a really lovely story, and I think a nice one to consider, the impact that teachers have. And you know, I've had other teachers on and have talked about how, you know, the teachers don't have any idea of the impact most of the time that they have on students. But to be able to actually see like tangible results in front of you
Yes.
just must feel so good, because
Yes.
it's an affirmation that what you're doing is meaningful.
They used to say that was our reward.
right.
You know, to look at a student and whatever they're doing in life now, to have them say, gee, I learned so much about the Constitution, and you know, now when I go anywhere and I hear people talking, they'll say, didn't you listen in Miss Reczek's class? What's the matter with you?
Nice.
But, yes, and you know, such a huge success rate with children who are, they're dedicated to what they do at every level of their life. Some of the best, well, my dentist, my plumber, you know, my doctor, they're all former students.
Isn't that
And
nice?
they've, you know, they were, you could see it in them even in the 8th grade. You could see who were going to, you know, the
Yep.
people who were going to be successful.
Yeah.
And it's not about money, it's about loving what you do and doing it well, treating your customers well.
Yep.
And I think if that's what you have at the end of it, at the end of your education, I think that's wonderful.
Yeah. What a lovely thought. What a lovely sentiment. I like that. So I'm going to switch gears now to your other career as a, what shall we call you? A home estate guru. Was there anything that you found during that work, like some item or some estate that you found was particularly like amazing and you didn't expect? Anything that kind of stands out as an unexpected?
Yeah, there were several, and one of them actually involved my uncle who lived in Bennington, and his wife. His wife was an only child, and her mother collected glass. She loved glassware.
Okay.
And as my Aunt Jean said, you know, I didn't play with, the things were off limits, and I didn't play with them.
Right.
And so she, after her mom passed away, she packed it all and was in the cellar. And my Uncle Joe was one of these who likes order.
Okay.
So finally, they decided to lighten the load. And she had in her collection, in her mother's collection, a marble. A quartz, I believe it was a quartz marble. It was 2.5 inches in diameter. And I posted it. At that time, we were selling on eBay as well.
Yeah.
And I posted it and was immediately inundated with the question, are you sure it's 2.5? So I said, okay, I'll get a professional.
Yeah.
And there was a hardware store downtown, and the guy was actually an engineer. This was his retirement.
Okay.
And he took out all of his tools and he measured it, and I said, okay, now write it down as a decimal
Yep.
and as a fraction,
Yep.
and just in case there's any question. And he did. And I mentioned it to my aunt, and my uncle just kind of laughed at it, you know.
Yeah, whatever.
I think it sold for like $2,800.
Oh my gosh.
And the man who bought it said, I can't believe I paid so much for a marble. And we said, we can't believe
we
you
can't
did
believe
either.
that either. Yeah.
But
Wow.
Apparently the reason so many people were looking for it for their collection was it was untumbled. So that's why they were interested in what was apparently in the marble industry.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of people do. They tumble out the little cracks and so on, the chips. And then it isn't what it was to begin with, so they
Right.
don't want it.
Right.
So that was one. And then another one was a friend of ours. He worked at the transfer station
Okay.
in Arlington. And he kept saying, you know, you can't really believe what people throw away in this Manchester area. So one day he called and said, I have a trunk. I'm going to bring it over to your house. Let me tell you what you think. It was a Louis Vuitton trunk from the 1920s.
Oh my gosh.
And the only thing on the outside that was, you know, not the way it came out of the factory were the labels from the countries this couple had traveled.
Oh my gosh.
And he said, what do you think? And I said, well, transportation would be the only thing I would have a question on, but they would have to pay their own, of course.
Right.
So I put it on, and that was about $4,000.
Wow.
And this was something that had been disposed of at the transfer station.
Right. I mean, it's amazing, the things that you can
the
find.
thing is, the woman who bought it said she wanted it brought down to the Louis Vuitton store in New York City, so we had someone from Manchester deliver it.
Wow.
She wanted it verified there, and then once it was verified, she sent it to a place in California where it could be refurbished.
Oh, wow.
And then it went from there to her home in Minnesota.
Oh my gosh, so this trunk kept traveling.
This trunk probably cost her $15,000 when she was finished.
Oh my gosh, what a treasure at the transfer station. You never know. You never know. I know. So a half hour goes very quickly, and we are getting towards the end of our time. So I want to ask you something that I try to ask all my guests. You've taught in different places, both in and out of the state. You've lived in different places in and out of the state. What is it that you love about this area, the Rutland County area?
One of the things I always say to people when they decide they want to move to Florida, North Carolina, wherever they're moving to, I always, I say, you can't compete with what we have here. The trees, the weather, even though winters and summers now can get a little intense. But I said, I think we have it all here in terms of the environment. And we need to make sure that it's something that's there for future generations. I think the close ties that I had to my community when I was small, with friends and so on, was a factor as well. Although I must say that after our parents died and when the houses changed hands, most of the people living in that area right now are probably in their 40s, 50s, and I have no clue who they are.
Yeah. Right. We don't tend to, be connected as much with our neighbors. In that sense.
We used to, as a child, we knew everybody and everyone knew us. It didn't matter whether you had a child that was our age or whether you were a grandmother. We visited. And but now I see a lot of no trespassing signs on houses and things like that. So yes.
The times have changed. The times have changed.
Yes. I don't typically like a lot of confusion, a lot of people. Like, I have a friend who keeps telling me that I need to go down to New York City on New Year's Eve, and I said, why?
I would say the same thing. Why? Why? You'll see more if you put the TV on than if you're there in Times Square.
Exactly. And I feel the same way about, sports. When you're sitting in the nosebleed section and you have to look at the TV.
Right. How is that any different
than what you're doing at home?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, there is something nice about not feeling like there's a population overload here. You have space,
And there are enough events going on if you're interested in music or the arts or sports activities. They're available.
Right.
We're kind of central to the Saratoga area, the Albany area, Burlington.
Easy access from here to
a 1 to 2 hour drive. So that's if the spirit moves you, you can get there.
Right.
So
I like that. Well, Mary, it's really been so nice to have you on and chat with you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah,
I enjoyed doing this.
Well, I'm glad. Me too. And to all of you out there, thank you for watching, and we will see you next time on Tea and Talk.